The dining room was stunning, exactly how Jess's mother-in-law liked things. Elegant, intimidating, and far too perfect. A long mahogany table stretched across the room like a runway for tension. Crystal glasses caught the soft glimmer of the chandelier overhead, and the scent of rosemary chicken filled the air. But Jess couldn't taste a thing, not yet. She sat 3 seats down from her mom, wedged between 2 of her husband's brothers. Across from her was her husband, pouring wine with the ease of a practiced host. He smiled. Plastic. Practiced. Like everything else tonight. This was the first family dinner since Jess got out of the hospital. First time back at the table. First time pretending everything was okay. She could feel it in her chest, the pressure, the expectation to smile, to eat, to laugh politely, as if nothing had happened, as if losing a child 3 months ago wasn't still a gaping hole inside her. Suddenly, her phone buzzed under the table. She barely glanced at it, expecting some boring notification. But what she saw was anything but ordinary. "Don't eat. Just trust me. Mom." The words blinked on her screen like a siren in silence. Jess's breath caught. Her eyes darted up. 3 seats down, her mom was looking right at her, smiling, but too still. Her eyes didn't match her face. Her fingers were clutched around her napkin, tight. Jess's fork hovered over the food. Stuffed mushrooms, roasted vegetables, that beautiful chicken glistening under the light. All of it suddenly looked dangerous. Her heart pounded. She wasn't sure what the message meant exactly, but she knew what it didn't mean. This wasn't paranoia. This was a warning, and she trusted her mom enough to obey it without hesitation. Without drawing attention, Jess lowered her fork and placed her phone face down next to her glass. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The room continued around her laughter, chatter, the clink of wine glasses. But Jess had already left the table, at least in her mind. Something was very wrong, and someone at this table wanted her gone. Her mother-in-law was pouring gravy over the roast, smiling sweetly. Too sweet. Every gesture, every word from her felt rehearsed, like an actress on stage, playing the role of the loving matriarch. She leaned over to Jess with a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You look much better now, sweetheart. I'm so glad you're finally moving on." Moving on. The words hit like ice. Jess tried to smile, but her chest tightened. Her grief wasn't something you move on from, like a broken engagement or a canceled vacation. It was a hole, a crater, and the woman speaking was the same one who had blamed her for losing the baby, said she was too weak to carry it to term. Now that same woman was acting like a host on a cooking show. The chill wasn't just in her words, it was in her eyes, cold, calculating, almost, satisfied. And then came her, the ex. She glided into the room like she belonged there. A little too late to be polite, a little too comfortable to be accidental. She wore a low-cut dress, laughed too loudly, and touched Jess's husband too often. Her hand rested on his shoulder longer than necessary. She leaned close when she whispered in his ear, like they shared a private joke Jess would never be invited to. Jess blinked slowly, the wine in her hand suddenly bitter. No one seemed surprised by the ex's presence, not even her husband. That's when it hit her. This dinner wasn't about family. It wasn't about healing. It was a performance. She wasn't a guest. She was the target. Jess smiled, not because she was okay, but because she had to. The kind of smile that keeps you alive at a table where you don't feel safe, where every person is a question mark and every plate might be a trap. She picked up her fork again and twirled it slowly, eyes still watching, calculating. Her mom hadn't texted again. Just that one message. "Do not eat. Just trust me." So Jess trusted her. She didn't take a single bite. Instead, while everyone was distracted laughing at the ex's story about Paris clinking glasses, Jess quietly reached for her phone, unlocked it under the table, and hit record. She slid it between two glasses, perfectly hidden behind the salt shaker. Then she leaned down, used her napkin, and subtly wrapped a piece of the chicken. She placed it in her purse like it was lipstick or a breath mint. One swift motion, unnoticed. Across the table, her mom was still watching. Her smile strained now, her eyes wide, filled with a fear Jess had never seen in her mother before. She mouthed something. Jess couldn't hear it, but she read the lips clearly. "There's something in your food." And that's when Jess knew this wasn't about hurt feelings. This wasn't just humiliation. This wasn't some petty drama between in-laws. This was something darker, more dangerous, maybe deadly. That night, Jess couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest like a weight. The kind that whispers, "You're not safe here." Her husband was already asleep, breathing steady, back turned to her. Jess lay beside him, eyes wide open. The events of the evening kept replaying in her head. The text, the stare from her mom, the smile from his ex. The taste of fear that never quite left her tongue. She slipped out of bed. She didn't know what she was looking for, just that something inside her was screaming to look. She opened the laptop, his laptop. No password change. She opened his email. At first, nothing suspicious. Work stuff, bills, travel confirmations. But then, a folder buried deep in his inbox, labeled simply old. Inside, conversations, hundreds of them, with her, the ex. Some messages were months old. Others were from days when Jess was in the hospital, fighting for her baby. "Just be patient. She's weak. She won't last much longer. We'll be free soon. She's fading. You'll see." Jess stared at the screen. Her hands trembled. Her chest felt hollow. This wasn't just emotional cheating. It wasn't even just betrayal. It was a plan, a timeline, a quiet countdown to her collapse. And the worst part? He never expected her to find it, because he never thought she'd have the strength. Jess needed answers, not just suspicions, not just gut feelings, proof. She didn't tell anyone, not her mom, not even her best friend. The only person who knew was the man she called 2 days after the dinner, a private investigator. Quiet, discreet, experienced. No names, just facts. She gave him everything. Photos, the wrapped piece of food, screenshots of messages, even the audio file from the hidden recording at dinner. He didn't say much, just listened, took notes. But 3 days later, he called her back. His voice was calm, too calm. "Ma'am, I need you to listen very carefully." Jess sat up straight, phone pressed to her ear. "You are in actual danger. This isn't paranoia. Do not eat anything that comes from that house. Nothing." She didn't speak, couldn't. He continued. "You're not the first woman connected to this family who's raised a red flag. There are patterns, consistent ones, and if what you've given me is real, then I'm afraid it's worse than you think." Jess's heart pounded. Worse than betrayal. Worse than emotional manipulation. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was survival. The next day, Jess went quiet. Not withdrawn, not defeated, just quiet, calculated. She stopped confronting, she stopped crying. Instead, she started planning. She bought 2 hidden cameras, one for the kitchen, one for the living room. She set up a voice-activated recorder in her bedroom and left another in her purse at all times. She created folders on a new hard drive and labeled each one by date. She didn't want revenge. She wanted proof. And then she'd want power. That afternoon, her mother-in-law showed up unannounced. A box of cookies, a bouquet of flowers, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just wanted to check on you, sweetheart. Feeling any better?" Jess nodded calm. "Much better, thank you." Her mother-in-law offered to make tea. Jess let her. She watched as the woman walked into the kitchen, graceful, confident, like she owned the space. What the woman didn't know was that every move was being recorded. The camera captured it all. The tea bag, the teaspoon, the subtle slide of something small and white dropped into the cup. No hesitation, no guilt, like someone who's done it before. Jess didn't flinch. She didn't stop her, she didn't scream, she just smiled, because now she had her move. Mini twist. The woman they thought was broken was now playing chess, and she had just made her first move. She was organizing digital files late one night, naming folders, labeling clips, sorting through audio recordings when she found it. A file she didn't recognize. It had her name on it, her birth date. The title, Psychiatric Evaluation, August 2018. Jess froze. 2018, that was 7 years ago. She hadn't even met her husband yet. She opened the file. It was official. Medical formatting, clinical language, hospital letterhead, a diagnosis that read, emotional instability, suspected adjustment disorder, recommends limited responsibility in caregiving. Jess's hands turned cold. None of this made sense. She had never been treated for any mental health issue, especially not in 2018. She checked the signature at the bottom, and that's when the air left her lungs. Signed, Dr. Helen Parker, her mother-in-law, a licensed physician. The woman who smiled at her across the dinner table had written a psychiatric report about her before she even became part of the family. Was it fake? Or worse, was it real? Had she been in a hospital without knowing? Or had her medical history been rewritten by someone with the power to do so? This wasn't just manipulation. This was premeditated character assassination, and it had started years before she ever said, "I do." Jess couldn't stop shaking. She printed the psychiatric file, held it in her hands, reread every word, again and again. Something about it gnawed at her. 2018, August. 7 years ago. What had even happened then? She couldn't remember much. She tried. She searched emails, photos, old messages, blank. Nothing from that time. Just a strange, foggy gap. The next morning, she did something she hadn't done in years. She went to her mother's house, alone. Her mother opened the door, surprised, but welcomed her with a hug. "Mom, was I ever hospitalized back in 2018? Silence. Her mother stepped back slowly. Her eyes dimmed. She hesitated. "There was a car accident," she finally admitted. "It wasn't serious, but you hit your head. The doctors said you had short-term memory loss. You were admitted for 2 days." Jess's mouth went dry. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Her mother looked away. "Because you didn't remember anything when you woke up. You were calm, smiling. I thought it was better to let it go." But Jess didn't feel calm now. There were pieces missing. Entire months she couldn't recall. Conversations, places, people, gone. And yet, somehow, her mother-in-law, a woman she didn't even know back then, had written a psychiatric file on her. How? Why? Was she there? Was she watching? Was this all planned? The worst kind of manipulation isn't emotional. It's when someone rewrites your history before you even know it was stolen. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't an accident. Everything that happened to Jess, the gaslighting, the whispers, the doubt, the fragile woman label, it was all planned. She found the evidence in the investigator's report, line after line, document after document. A hospital referral signed by her mother-in-law, a therapy recommendation that Jess never received but was filed under her name. A private psychiatrist linked to the same clinic her mother-in-law once owned. Dates aligned too perfectly. 2018, the fake psychiatric file. 2019, the first fake prescription. 2020, fertility testing marked unsuitable for childbearing due to emotional instability. She never applied for testing. She never signed those papers. But someone else had. Someone who knew the system. Someone who owned it. It hit Jess like a truck. This wasn't just a toxic family. This was systemic character assassination, a carefully planted trail of evidence designed to follow her like a shadow. In court, in hospitals, in future custody battles, she wouldn't stand a chance. Not because she was unstable, but because they had spent years proving she was. Mini twist. This was never just about the baby. This was never just about marriage. This was about power. About turning women into case files. About institutionalized erasure. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was strategic. Jess wasn't reacting. She was building. Every recording, every document, every detail. She began keeping a digital log, organized by day, time, subject. Audio clips from dinner, footage from the hidden kitchen camera, screenshots of bank transfers from her husband to the ex, copies of messages, metadata, timestamps, locations. Nothing was too small. No moment was dismissed. She even wore a voice recorder during visits with her husband's family, capturing conversations so subtle they could have been missed. But when heard again, they reeked of manipulation. Are you sure you're remembering that right, Jess? Maybe this is just your anxiety again. You've always been sensitive. Her investigator guided her through everything: how to extract data from photos, how to retrieve deleted messages, how to legally protect evidence. Each step gave Jess something she hadn't felt in months: control. Not over them, but over her truth. She wasn't gathering revenge. She was gathering facts. And facts, once revealed, don't go quietly. Jess didn't go to the media. Not yet. She went to the mothers, the anonymous forums, the private Facebook groups, the hidden threads where women told the truth because no one else would listen. She created a burner account. No name, no photo. Just a zip file titled, "If this happened to you, read this." Inside audio recordings, screenshots, medical files. Her story written in detail but anonymously. A single line. "Has anyone else experienced something like this?" From Dr. Helen Parker. She sent it to 5 groups, quietly. By the next morning, it had been shared 237 times. By the end of the week, thousands of women were reading it, commenting, sharing, some with tears, some with rage. That's the same doctor who said I wasn't fit to adopt. She prescribed me medication that nearly ruined my liver. I always thought something was off. Jess watched from behind the screen. No name, no voice. But she didn't need credit. She needed the fire to start. And now it was burning. It started with a phone call. Jess was sitting at her desk editing audio files when her phone lit up. Incoming call, Ryan. She didn't pick up. Not the first time, not the second. On the 3rd ring, she answered, calm, quiet. Hello? His voice came in fast, shaky, almost unhinged. Jess, what's going on? Someone's leaking stuff. About Helen, about me, about the clinic. This isn't just drama anymore. This is serious. My job's on the line. Someone is trying to destroy me. There was a pause. Jess looked out the window. Sunlight filtered through the blinds. For the first time in months, she felt nothing. No anger, no fear, just clarity. Maybe, she said, her voice soft, or maybe it's the universe, putting people exactly where they belong. Click. She ended the call. Mini Twist Jess hadn't published everything, but they were already afraid, and that fear meant the truth was getting close. There was a name Jess kept seeing: on legal documents, bank transactions, emails between her husband and the clinic, always listed under advisor, legal representative, or simply AB. The investigator dug deeper. Then, one afternoon, he showed her a folder. On the cover, Arthur Bellman, family lawyer, legal counsel to her in-laws. A quiet man with no digital footprint, no social media, no press, no scandal. But behind the scenes, he was everywhere. Bellman was the one who notarized the psychiatric file. Bellman was the executor of their prenuptial agreement. Bellman had power of attorney over several family trusts. Bellman was listed in 7 questionable property transfers involving women who were later declared unfit. Jess's stomach turned. This wasn't just about her. It wasn't even just about Helen. It was a machine. And Bellman was the man behind the gears. His name never made the headlines, but his signature was on everything. The system hadn't failed these women. It had been designed to erase them. It started with a headline. Whistleblower claims psychiatrist fabricated mental records to strip mothers of custody. Then came the flood. Local news, national papers, talk shows, podcasts. Everyone wanted the story. But what they didn't expect was how many women had one just like it. Within 72 hours, over a dozen women came forward, all with the same names attached. Dr. Helen Parker, attorney Arthur Bellman. One woman had been committed for paranoia after discovering financial abuse. Another was labeled emotionally unstable weeks before losing custody in a divorce. A third had been prescribed sedatives by Helen, then filmed while incoherent to use in court. Same pattern, same language, same manipulation. They told me I wasn't safe to be a mother. They said I was broken. I started to believe them. They made me think I was the problem. Jess watched it unfold on national television. Interviews, documents, experts, survivors. She wasn't alone. She was the matchstick. And now the fire was unstoppable. Jess didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't go viral with a video. She sent a file, a zip folder encrypted, signed, time-stamped, addressed to journalists, investigators, civil rights groups, women's rights organizations, and one federal attorney. Inside, audio from family dinners, footage of substances being added to her tea, messages between her husband and his ex, the forged psychiatric reports, bank transfers, Bellman's property deals, statements from over 20 other victims, a map connecting names, clinics, custody cases, and cash. She didn't want revenge. She wanted reckoning. And it came fast. Investigations were launched, licenses suspended, hearings scheduled. Her truth wasn't just a testimony. It was evidence. It was strategy. It was justice with timestamps. Many Twist Jess wasn't just one woman who fought back. She was the key, the door opener. The one who unlocked a decades-long pattern of systemic abuse disguised as mental care. And once the lock clicked open, there was no turning back. It began with a knock, a legal notice hand-delivered to the Parker estate, then another to Bellman's law office, then a third to Ryan. Within 48 hours, the dominoes fell. All personal and business accounts frozen, properties flagged for investigation, overseas assets frozen by federal request. The family's wealth, once untouchable, was now under forensic audit. But the real blow, the prenup. For years, it was used to control Jess, to silence her, trap her. It stated she'd walk away with nothing because she was mentally unstable. But now, that clause was voided. The court ruled the contract invalid based on fraud, coercion, and psychological manipulation. Jess didn't just get her freedom back, she got her power. And this time, the law was finally on her side. Everything they built on lies was collapsing under the weight of the truth. The courtroom was full. Journalists, activists, former patients, even some who once doubted Jess were now standing. She walked to the witness stand. No lawyer spoke for her. No script, no rehearsal. Only truth. She looked directly at the panel, her voice clear, unshaken. For years, I was told I was weak, hysterical, unstable. I believed them, until I realized my fear wasn't a flaw. It was a reaction to the danger they built around me. Then she did what no one expected. She read every name, of every woman who had come forward, of every victim whose file had been buried, of every mother who had her child taken by force, disguised as care. And then she ended with hers. My name is Jess. You called me paranoid. You drugged me, gaslit me. You tried to erase me. But I'm still here, and now you have to see me." The courtroom was silent. Not because she was broken, but because she was undeniable. The woman they once called crazy had just made the system kneel. Jess was the first voice, but she wasn't the last. More women came forward, then more. Stories that spanned years across states with the same names, the same signatures, the same silencing. They told me I was too emotional to raise a child. They medicated me until I couldn't think straight. They used the law not to protect, but to punish. It was no longer a case. It was a reckoning. Federal agents launched a full-scale investigation. Arthur Bellman was subpoenaed, then formally charged. Fraud, conspiracy, abuse of power. And Helen Parker, her license was revoked permanently, stripped of her title, her name removed from every clinic she'd ever touched. She was arrested on charges of criminal negligence, intentional falsification of records, conspiracy to commit psychological abuse, and obstruction of justice. But this wasn't just punishment. It was reclamation of voices, of rights, of motherhood. Mini twist. This wasn't a revenge tale anymore. It was collective justice for every woman who'd ever been gaslit by the system built to silence her. The house hadn't changed. The curtains were still beige, the doorknobs still squeaked. Even the old lamp in the hallway still flickered when she walked past. But Jess had changed. She carried no suitcase, just a small linen bag. Inside, clean sheets, fresh flowers, a notebook. She didn't walk in afraid. She walked in like the house belonged to her now. Room by room, she opened the windows. She let light in. She aired out the silence that once pressed against her chest like stone. She changed the bed sheets. White, soft, peaceful. She made tea not from anyone else's hands. She sat on the porch barefoot, for the first time. The house was quiet, but she wasn't afraid of the quiet. There were no ghosts, no poison, no pretending. Just air, light, space. Peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you choose. And Jess had finally chosen it. Jess didn't want a monument, or applause, or headlines. She wanted a pen and paper. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one where someone once tried to poison her, and she wrote, not a memoir, not a lawsuit, a pledge. I will never forget, and I will never let this happen to another woman again. She wrote about gaslighting, about fear that wears pearls and calls itself love, about the quiet violence of polite manipulation, and how truth, when told without shame, can shatter walls. She didn't write as a victim. She wrote as a witness, as a survivor, as someone who saw and refused to stay silent. Her story wouldn't end in trauma. It would begin something new, a movement, a resource, a voice loud enough to make sure no one ever feels alone in the dark again. Because healing isn't forgetting. Healing is remembering differently. There was no music, no fireworks, no grand declaration. Just a man and a garden. He didn't ask Jess to forget. He didn't pretend to fix her. He simply showed up with sunflowers and silence that didn't need to be filled. They didn't speak much that morning. They planted seeds. He dug the holes. She laid the roots. Somewhere between the marigolds and lavender, Jess realized she wasn't starting over. She was continuing. But this time, not alone. He didn't try to rewrite her past. He just honored it, the way someone honors a scar, not for the pain, but for the strength it took to heal. The garden didn't bloom overnight. Neither did Jess. But both were growing. And then, her voice soft, certain, revenge didn't turn me into a villain. It turned me into someone who survived the unthinkable and chose to live loudly. Never underestimate the strength of a woman they thought was broken. Jess didn't just survive. She turned her trauma into truth. Her truth became action, and that action became justice, not only for herself, but for a silent army of women long ignored. Her story reminds us silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's preparation. Pain doesn't make you fragile. It makes you real. Justice doesn't come from the loudest voice. It comes from those who refuse to be erased. And above all, you don't have to be a hero. You just have to speak your truth. If you believe that stories have the power to change lives, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or forgotten, then this is your space. Subscribe to Through Her Eyes. We tell the stories no one dares to tell. We name the forgotten. We give voice to the silenced. Tap subscribe, turn on notifications, because maybe the next story we tell will be yours.